Hey guys, welcome to the final mini lecture 6. We got a lot to get to in this lecture. It's the last video lecture in terms of our assignments. I might do one recap at the end, but nothing pertinent to the assignments necessarily, just a recap of the class. So this is the last one that has to do with your assignments, and the last assignment you have to do is the recommendation report, which is essentially the culmination of everything you've done this semester. So if you think back to your introductory memo, your proposal, your progress report, your visualizations, everything that you've done, all has culminated into this. So in this way, it's been scaffolded. It's been kind of meant to reflect the documentation cycle in technical communication, where you start with an idea, you get it passed, you update people on it, and you complete it. And then that report then in turn starts something else, and the cycle continues. If you'll recall, we had a picture up there kind of tracing that documentation cycle. Now, so you have 3 chapters to read this week. One is chapter 19, writing recommendation reports. I cannot communicate to you how important that chapter is, because in it you will find the proper form and the proper criteria, the proper way to make headings, the proper way to integrate visuals. Everything is in that chapter. So when you are writing your recommendation report, when you're writing your final report, you want to have chapter 19 open and look through and make sure that your report models the report that's in there. There's a really good example, I think, starting on page 534. Markel kind of traces the same project about the clickers in college classrooms, and he kind of traces the project to kind of model the documentation cycle that we're doing. You just have to make it relevant for your own. And then Appendix B and Appendix C. I'm going to talk about those at the end of the video lecture, because we got a lot to talk about in terms of the recommendation reports. So the recommendation report comes from a place of ethos, experience, and research. And those are the real 3 things. So if you recall the concept of ethos, it's a rhetorical concept that talks about the character of the individual being presented. And character usually comes from experience, it comes through credibility, it comes through what kind of person you are. So just like when we're more likely to believe a message from someone that's credible and someone that's reputable and someone we trust, that's how ethos works. And I know this seems really short because we're only technically 5 weeks in. By the time you submit this, it'll be 6 weeks. But you are now in a position of authority. You are now in a position of ethos because you've done the research, right? All the research you've done, all the secondary research you did, academic, non-academic research, the survey that you sent out, that's primary research. That matters. And I know it was kind of tedious and it might have got lost in this process, but that is very meaningful research. So you have more of a point of experience on this topic, whatever topic you chose, case 1, 2, or 3, than the average individual. And everything comes from that point of authority, is based on the research that you've done. So that documentation process was meant to build your ethos in a way, to say, I proposed this based upon my reading of the case. Now, it's a bit simulated because this is a classroom, so it's not as organic, but I've done the research, I've analyzed the research, now here's what I have to offer. So you weren't an authority at the beginning, and I think a lot of you kind of sense that. You had really no idea. You're just kind of thrown into these cases with a lot of background and a lot of research that you maybe had no background in whatsoever. But now, although you're not necessarily subject matter experts just yet, you are at a point of authority where you can make a recommendation. And that's the essence of a recommendation report. Your recommendations have to be well informed. And that comes through research, that comes through credibility, that comes through ethos and experience, which you now have. So the gist then, and the main thing that you need to focus on for the recommendation report is it's pretty simple. Come up with a recommendation. So whether you chose case 1, case 2, case 3, you've done the research, you've analyzed what students think about the topic, you've read journal articles, you've read non-academic sources. Now, what do you think should happen? Knowing what you know now, what do you suggest for us, the department, going forward? That is the absolutely fundamental key of the recommendation report. So you'll see in chapter 19 there is a variety of sections. You have the introduction, you have the methods section, you have the conclusion section, you have all these things, and that's good. And the methods, by the way, you're just talking about what research you did. So that's a research method. So talk about your questionnaire, talk about your secondary research stuff. methods, research methods, are essentially just sharing how you collected the information, how you got the information, how you got the data that you now have. Again, review the example in Chapter 19. I cannot stress that enough. And you also have to reread the syllabus before you do this assignment, because there are optional components in the report that you don't have to do, such as the glossary, for example. So read through the syllabus, keep Chapter 19 open. Table 19.1 has all the information you need. It has all the headings. It literally lays out the entire template for you. You just got to fill it in with your information. So the recommendation. So what makes a good recommendation then? You'll see the chapter focuses on the concept of feasibility, right? To me, I think there are kind of four things that make a recommendation very good. One is feasibility. One is that it's informed by data, right? Just kind of arbitrarily saying, yeah, the department should do this without really consulting the student body or without doing research on what other schools are doing. That doesn't make much sense. It has to be cost effective, right? You can't just propose something that costs $250,000 to do because that's not realistic, which kind of circles back to the feasibility thing. And then it has to be critical. What that means is there has to be critical thinking involved. You have to be aware of the larger structure at hand and the larger context in which things are happening. And that is where your research and your knowledge base comes in. So the feasibility is the main part, though. So coming up, solving a problem, and offering a feasible solution, or offering a feasible solution to solve that problem, is very difficult, right? Especially, again, because you guys might not see yourselves as a part of what's going on. You guys aren't necessarily subject matter experts, so it might be weird to kind of stick your neck out there and make a recommendation in fear that it gets caught down. That's fine. 9 out of 10 recommendations don't go through. That's fine. I'm not assessing whether or not it goes through, or, this isn't necessarily practical. This is still a simulation. This is a classroom. But I will look at how feasible is your solution. So you really want to kind of always keep in mind, is this possible? Not only is this right and is this informed, is this most appropriate given the situation at hand, but is it feasible? So what I mean by feasible, so for case number 1, with the degree change from the IDS to the BS in English, an unfeasible solution would be, I think the department should just start from scratch and create just one English track and have students kind of create their own from there, a BA or a BS, right? That's not possible. You can't just get rid of classes. You can't just start over again, right? This is a really difficult process, as you probably found out through the research. If you chose case 2, like what students know about technical writing, if you propose this like $100,000 ad campaign that raises awareness of what technical writing is, that would be effective, but that's not feasible because English, like most departments, don't have $100,000 just laying around for ad campaigns. So just because it would be effective, it doesn't mean it's feasible. That's why the feasibility concept is the main one that undergirds all of this. And for case 3, finding out what digital technologies or digital writing technology students use, you shouldn't make a recommendation that, okay, we now know that these are the 4 technologies that students use. We should completely reorganize the English curriculum based upon this. And all curriculum across the College of Arts and Letters should be founded upon these 4 technologies, right? That's not feasible either. Now, these are extreme examples, and I hope none of you would ever propose these because of their outlandishness. But just to reiterate the point that feasibility is an important concept, and it requires a problem-solving skill that is research-informed in that you can have control over by conducting primary research, by getting to know what students think, and also by seeing what other schools are doing and finding out other academic research and see what the main issues are on the topic. But it is kind of a skill that it's really up to you, right? This is where your creativity comes in, right? The question mark here is, what do we do now, right? And this is what separates technical writing from a lot of other English classes is you analyze something, you choose a topic, and you analyze it. But instead of just writing a conclusion about your analysis, you're actually providing a next step, right? You're providing a bridge into a new project. So it's much more practical in that way. You're not just doing research for the sake of doing research. You're providing an informed position about what we should do next. It's very action-based. So that is the gist of the recommendation report. So look at the model. presented in there. I think it's about 10 pages in Chapter 19. I'm only requiring 6 of you, so do keep in mind that the length is not equal. Pay attention to the rubric criteria. There are 6 criteria that we're paying attention to. Clarity of presentation, integration and relevance of research, document formatting, quality and feasibility of recommendation. So I'll just be looking at the quality of your recommendation in and of itself. APA formatting, grammar, sentence structure, those 2 are pretty normal as well. So you want to keep it clear, right? And you want to make it well formatted. In the syllabus, I say I expect perfection, and that might be unfair, but that is true because it is a final report that if you were to send to the curriculum board or any other important body, having grammatical errors or formatting issues or spacing issues is not going to fly. So I'm going to hold you more accountable for those things. I have been anyway so far this semester, but I'm going to hold you more accountable for those things in the report, in the final report. So Appendix B and Appendix C, you're not really reading them as chapters necessarily. You can certainly integrate them in your summary for your weekly reading notes, but Appendix B is essentially a style guide. It's for APA style, which is what you guys will be doing. So use it as a reference guide. It literally has every single thing in there. Every single type of source that you could ever imagine is in there. So if you found this weird source and you're like, oh, I don't know, can you cite this? It's in there. All sources are in there, so there's really no excuse. Page 687 has a sample reference list. Follow that. It's in chronological order. It has the right spacing, the right indentation, everything. Appendix C is very interesting because it essentially goes over a lot of the editing and proofreading issues. And the 3 issues, I think there's dozens of them in there, but the 3 issues that have kind of come up the most in my reading of all of your work collectively, some broad issues, I've identified 3 of them. So I'm going to encourage all of you, even if you think you don't have this problem, I'd encourage all of you just to check out these 3 things. Page 715, page 716, and page 720. So page 715 pays attention to comma splices. The comma splice is when you use a comma to separate 2 complete sentences. And I see that a lot. Commas are not meant to do that. So pay attention to 715. Or you may have seen me write comma splice on your document. You might have seen me post a link to it, or maybe not. Page 716 is ambiguous pronoun reference, right? This is a bit more complicated, so pay close attention to it and just always think about, is what you are writing about referring to the right pronoun? So, for example, she decided to take her baby to the park, which sucked, right? Well, when you say which sucked, what does that mean? The park that sucked, or that act was not good, right? So you're not referencing the right thing. Page 720 is about tenses, which I know a lot of you, it's this kind of weird thing that's happened, and that usually happens in technical writing course when you're asked to write objectively. You kind of try to use this really abstract language that talks in these weird tenses. Always write in present tense, right? And then the past perfect tense, which page 720 goes over. So present tense. So if you're making an argument, even if it was written in like 1928, right, by John Smith or something, you would say Smith argues this, not Smith argued, because every text is technically in past tense. This video is in past tense technically because the time you're seeing it has already passed. So use present tense just to be consistent. And then the past perfect is I began my research in May, or I had began my research in May, or I begun my research in May. Look at page 720, and it goes over that, because present tense doesn't mean you can't talk about things in the past. You could still talk about things in the past in present tense without having it sound weird, because that's inevitable. As humans, things happen before and after and now. And then the last one I'll say, which is not a common error, but something that will be important for the recommendation report, is page 735, and it has to do with numbers. Do you use numeric? Do you use numbers, or do you spell out the numbers in your report? And so there's a guideline for now. So when you say, I had 8 participants, do you do the number 8, or do you write out 8, E-I-G-H-T, right? So these are some concerns. So that's a longer video than usual, but this recommendation report is extremely important. So be sure to follow the format that's outlined in Chapter 19. Make sure you have all the sections, reread the syllabus for sure, because I'm going to be holding you accountable for that. Look at the rubric, see what criteria I'm looking for. And as always, if you have any questions, be sure to email me.